Is selling just selling, or is selling really a service? I was struck by what a difference this makes if implemented properly. Join me and David Kurkjian as he shares his sales wisdom and secrets in this podcast. It'll be worth your time. Enjoy. Welcome to the Charlie Paparelli Show. Today's guest is David Kurkjian, and our topic today I've entitled Beyond the Pitch, Connecting on a Human Level. Why this topic now? I learned this from David, that approximately 80% of the sales cycle takes place before a salesman even shows up in the deal. And we all do this. So we do a lot of research on the web on products that we're interested in, and our corporate clients are doing the same thing. They're looking at the top 3 solutions that they might be looking at. And that's 80% of the sales cycle. So by the time they connect with a rep, there's only 20% left. And what David works on is how do you make that 20% as a rep of high enough value so that you win the deal? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. David is an established sales professional. He's an author, and he's working with Fortune 500 companies and small to medium-sized businesses also. He helps them increase sales by increasing the value of these interactions between the salesman and the prospect in that 20%. In addition, he offers his services as a mentor for free to the startup community at Atlanta Tech Village, and he's been doing that for 12 years. And that's actually where David and I met, as I was a mentor there for a while. I'm no longer a mentor there, but he's hanging in there and doing a good job for them. So today we're going to be exploring how to connect with your prospect on a human level to gain the greatest value from that 20%. Just to repeat this again, that 20% of the sales cycle that actually, as a sales rep, you're involved. Or as an entrepreneur, who, by the way, in a startup needs to be the number 1 sales rep when there are no other sales reps in the company. And that's why David helps those entrepreneurs. So welcome, David.
Charlie, hey, happy to be here today, and so excited about the conversation we're getting ready to have.
It's going to be one of the things that you told me that has stuck with me is you said, when I do these sales workshops, at Atlanta Tech Village for entrepreneurs, there's always that aha moment, okay? And that stuck with me. I'm saying, okay, so you're doing a sales, and you said there's always that aha moment. It's always when you say, they go, oh, wow, tell me about that.
Yeah, it really is. So entrepreneurs are so energized by what it is that they've created, whether it's a software solution or another product or service, because they're so immersed in the challenge of overcoming a challenge for their clients and prospects. They think way too much about that product and actually look at the world more from their point of view. So the aha moment is as I'm walking through a simple roadmap to build a conversation, they realize, wait, this is all about the prospect. What you're showing me right now is a way to change my point of view and speak to the value of what it is that I've created from the point of view of the individuals that I want to do business with. So that's the aha moment. That's when they realize I need to change the way that I'm speaking or communicating or messaging to the prospects and clients that I'd like to do business with.
How do you get them off of this? You're right. To create a company, the thing that first comes to mind is I need to see a problem that I can solve. As an entrepreneur, I then design a solution, hopefully an elegant and easy solution that people will be attracted to. And, if I build it, they will in fact come, which isn't quite how it works. So Here I am. I'm very product-centric. I'm very solution-centric, even if I'm in a service business. How do you move me to be prospect-centric? Because I've just spent a couple of years on being product and solutions. Solution-centric, I'll call it, okay? How do you move me so that I do have that aha?
So, one of the things that I speak to, and this is really important because of the reality that you shared right at the outset of our conversation, that again, 80% of the research has already been done. And so the way to get sales professionals to understand how to communicate from the point of view of the individuals that they want to do business with, I asked them a very simple question. How is the prospect or customer that you're going to do business with, how are they going to be better off as a result of doing business with you? And as they answer the question, I get them to try and answer the question without saying anything about the product or service that they've created, because that can become the North Star in the relationship. Because Charlie, one of the biggest challenges that sales professionals have is that, again, the profession has gotten a little bit of a black eye, largely because of sales professionals behaving badly. And when a sales professional is behaving badly, it's typically because they have the wrong intent in the relationship. They're trying to consummate a sale. And
Yeah, so
the person that they're
they're
communicating,
just transaction based.
yeah, it's just
Yeah.
transaction based. And the person that they're communicating with gets the sense, wait, we're having this conversation and we're building this relationship so that you can have a sale, not so that you can help me. And so by getting a entrepreneur or a sales professional to answer that question, how the prospect is going to be better off as a result of doing business with them, I then look at them and go, make that the North Star of the relationship. Make that your goal, your objective, that they can realize the benefit. And a lot of times I'll hear them say things like, well, I'm creating time freedom, or I'm creating peace of mind in their world. And I look at them and I go, that's amazing. I mean, the world that we live in today, very little time freedom, very little peace of mind. So if you can make this your goal and objective to the point, and this is really a stretch here, to the point where if your prospect says no, that you actually feel worse about the fact that they're not going to get time freedom or peace of mind than you are about losing the sale. So it really comes back to the intent that the sales professional is bringing to that relationship.
Okay, so help me with this. It was interesting when you said, what benefits are they going to get?
Mm-hmm.
Think about that. So you're trying to get me off of me and thinking about them. Okay. And I think it would be difficult for a lot of people salespeople, because they would think they've been trained. If you buy my product, these things will make your life better. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're saying, no, don't do that. You're saying, forget about your product. What is it that person, that prospect is really looking for, really looking to achieve personally? And one of those things is, I want to make sure that I keep my job.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's really important. And we see that a lot in the Fortune, in corporations. We're sitting there trying to sell them and saying, this is going to move you up the ranks. And I'm like, I'd just really be happy keeping my job. So I need to be thinking their way, not my way, not what I think I can do for them, but really, how can I help them achieve their personal goals? Okay. In this relationship building, which is not transactional.
Right.
Okay. So that gets me to think about the other person, not as a prospect, but as a person. Is that another way to say it?
It is. It is. And it reminds me of a workshop that I did years ago for a software company here in Atlanta. And I had a half a day to work with about 40 salespeople. And
God.
the, the COO had responsibility for sales marketing. She was running a lot of the operational aspect of the software company. And so at lunch, right before she introduces me, she puts a slide up on the wall in this ballroom, and it says $88.8 million. And she looks at the room and she goes, the most important thing in every one of your lives is how you're going to help this company achieve $88.8 million. So Charlie, she winds down a little bit and then she introduces me. I stand up and I look at the room and I looked over at her and I said, so I've got some good news and some bad news. I said, here's the bad news. That $88.8 million is not the most important thing. And I had to do a little side glance to make sure she wasn't going to kick me out of the room at that point.
I was thinking, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I would be sitting, if I were her, I'd be saying, where's he going with this?
Right. So I looked at the room and I said, that's the bad news. I said, but here's the good news. If you can answer this question in integrity before you sit down to meet with an individual that you want to build a relationship with, If you can answer this question in integrity, there's some good news. And the question is, how is your prospect going to be better off as a result of doing business with you? And I said, if you'll make that the North Star of the relationship that you're trying to build, here's the good news. You're going to blow past that 88.8 million.
Okay, you can stay up in front of the room. And that's a
Yeah.
you saved yourself.
There was a palpable sigh of relief, again, from the CEO. And it ended up being just an amazing workshop.
This is to, it seems like it comes back to a principle of, that we're here as a salesperson. I'm really here to serve you. Okay. And to serve you, I need to understand what your needs are. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to you're here. I'm here so that you have an opportunity to buy my thing. Right.
Right.
So this principle of service, others first, if you will, versus product or solution first, or me first, makes it seems to be an underlying principle in all this, is it?
It is. It is. Another quick example. So when I was 4 or 5 years into my sales career, I was really struggling with, is this what I want to give my life to? And again, I would have probably been 34, 35 years old. I was working for AT&T at the time, and I'm projecting out to another 30 years of being in the sales profession.
That's about when it happens too.
It is. It is.
Yeah,
You
it's
start
either 34, I'd say 34 to 38, you start saying, is this all there is, right?
Right.
That's good. So go ahead.
Yeah.
So what happened?
Yeah, so I was giving consideration to going to work for a not-for-profit, because most not-for-profits are very clear about the impact that they're going to have not only on the world, but on the individuals that they serve. And I wanted my life to count for something. I wanted to know that I'm making a difference, as I'm spending time here on planet Earth. And as I'm carrying this internal struggle, I have a meeting with my client, GE Capital. And I walk into this executive's room, and we've got about an hour, and we're supposed to talk about a data center and all this, technology. And it's going to be a big deal. And I notice immediately that he seems distracted or off. And so I looked at him and I said, Mike, you seem a little distracted today. Is everything okay? And he looked at me and he said, shut the door. And so I shut the door behind me. And he proceeded to tell me, Charlie, that he had been in the Vietnam, been exposed to Agent Orange, and that the doctors were having a hard time getting his medication right. And as a result of that, his wife was in the middle of divorcing him. His kids didn't want to have anything to do with him. And I'm sitting here listening to this, and I'm just feeling horrible that he's experiencing this in his life. And so he took about, 50 minutes of the hour that we were there to actually talk about this data center. And he gets to the end of sharing this with me. And I looked at him, I said, Mike, I know this is going to sound a little strange, but would you let me pray for you? And he said, and Charlie, to this day, I don't really remember much of what I prayed. Again, because
And this wasn't something this wasn't part of your sort of sales methodology back then either.
No.
You just felt you got urged. There was a movement by the Spirit in you that just said, I need to do this.
Yeah.
And that was great. You asked his permission. Okay. But you sat there and listened to his whole story.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
I did.
Okay.
And so, I prayed for him. He apologized. He came around from the other side of the desk. He looked at me and actually he gave me a hug. And he said, thank you for listening to me. Thank you for asking that question. And so as I left his office and I'm walking down the halls of GE Capital, I had this epiphany. And the epiphany was, I can put my head down and sleep at night in peace if in my sales role, I know that I'm making a difference in the relationships that I'm building with my prospects and customers. Now, it's not to say that I'm praying for every person that I encounter in the business world. This was a very unique situation, but it caused me to shift my mindset from, I can serve people with my product. If I really know that there's a problem or a challenge or there's something happening.
Really, I can serve people using my product as a platform from which to serve them.
Yes.
So it's an opportunity it's a reason for me, or it's a reason for us to get together.
Yeah.
And the question is do we treat each other as human beings, or do we treat each other as prospect salespeople?
Yeah. Yeah. And
that's the delineation there. How do you see that person across the desk?
Yeah. So I had
And how do they see you? Wow. Okay.
So I had an earlier moment. So I'm going to go back a little bit earlier. I'm 20 years old, and I had just given my life to Jesus maybe 6 months or 9 months before that. And I'm working at a restaurant in Buckhead, a very famous steak restaurant, and it's lunchtime. And the lunch shift, you always wanted to avoid being there late because the Buckhead tennis women would come in after playing tennis, and they'd sit down at a table, about 16 of them, and they would order iced tea and soup. And then they would, and it gets even better. And at the end of that, they would ask for separate checks. And so I'm back in the serving station, and I get assigned this table, which means I'm not going to get to leave early. And I'm slinging ice into those iced tea cups, and I'm mad. I'm absolutely mad. And Charlie, God's Spirit spoke to me in almost a tangible way, and He said, "David, it's not about you; it's about them." And if you'll focus on them and make this the best experience possible, it's going to change your mindset towards just serving and waiting on people in a restaurant setting.
And this is while you were at the serving station stewing and pissed off.
Hmm. Yeah.
You just heard this voice. I love this. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what did you do? So you get this message, David, it's not about you.
Yeah. It immediately changed my mindset. I was like, you're right. I knew in the moment this is the right way to approach what I'm doing.
So then
And
what happened? Tell me what happened in that in that circumstance right then. Because I can picture the 16 women there. I can picture the soup in front of them, and I can picture them wanting more ice and more iced tea. Well,
right.
as they're sort of talking to each other, right? And you're sitting there, okay, you go from, I'm not going to make a dime out of this for all this work, okay, to now all of a sudden you're all in. You are there for them.
Right. Right. And
so what did you do?
so it had an immediate impact. In my interaction with them, I'm looking at them from the point of view of what can I do to make this an even better experience? Can I heat your soup up? Can I make sure your tea's staying topped off? So it was an immediate shift, not first in my heart attitude towards them, and then in my behavior. So once I changed my heart and my mindset, it affected my behavior in a way that created a lot more success in my serving role. Because I ended up working in the restaurant industry for probably another 4 or 5 years after that.
Well, tell me this. Let's go back. There was a change in your heart, and a change in mindset. When you were sitting there stewing at the serving station, what was your heart and your mindset then? You just described, spent a lot of time describing it after, God spoke to you. What was it before then while you were stewing? Where was your heart and your head?
Yeah, it was more around, first of all, I can't believe I'm going to have to stay here until like 3:30, 4 o'clock.
Okay.
I want to get home so I can go for a run.
Yep.
I'm not going to be making any money off of this table because, again, they're just ordering soup and nice tea. And so my mindset was all on me. It was all on how this is going to impact me and how I'm not going to get what I want. And so that's where my heart and my mind was.
And that's why I asked this, because that is the pure delineation. Everything that you described in answering my question started with I. Okay. And then when you talked about when God said to you, it's not about you, he does one of those circles and says, it's not about you. So the I gets taken out, first person's gone. And now it's about you. Okay. Or for second or third person, you or them. So I'm here for you. So what can I do now, since my heart is to serve you and my mindset is to do all I can to make this a great experience? That changes everything. But that's jumping a very high wall, which when God spoke to you, you just got there. You like kind of walked through it magically is what you did. So then how did you carry that? You said you were in the restaurant business then for another 4 years.
Yeah.
So how did you carry that forward from there in the restaurant business? In the restaurant business.
So every time I would approach a table, again, my mindset was, how can I go above and beyond just whatever their expectations are, whatever their previous experience has been in working with and visiting this restaurant, maybe working with a different server. I was always thinking, what can I do to go above and beyond? And, sometimes it would be a little thing where I would be standing at one table, actually bringing out the food, and I'd hear the conversation at another table that I was responsible for, where the wife may say something like, I don't know, should I get the apple pie or the cheesecake? And so I would show up at the table and I'd go, you really should get the cheesecake. And they're like, oh, you were paying attention. Wow. So just finding little things like that, to be a little more inquisitive about what would make a good meal or a good experience, asking the additional questions to make sure that, again, their experience is going to be outstanding. Even to the point when you'd have somebody, every now and then, you'd have somebody do a dine and dash where they would just not pay for the meal and they'd take off. Yeah. And as a server, I would be responsible for their check. And it even got to the point, was I upset when that happened? Sure. But I'm also thinking, did I create an amazing experience for them? I mean, even though they stiffed me and walked out the restaurant without paying.
So even create a great experience for someone who's a crook.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
But you're true to yourself. So because that's another choice. When someone treats you like you're doing this, and I'm helping people, and I'm all about them, and what happens is there's no trade-off there, right?
Mm-mm.
They treat you shabbily. That's the other side and that happens in sales situations. The prospect continues to treat you shabbily. How do you deal with that?
It really is the same, because if you truly have a mindset of, I'm here to serve this person, then that shifts your focus from what's in it for me to what, very similar to the story I just shared about the cheesecake and apple pie. Having conversations with prospects and customers, there should always be a focus around what additional value can I bring? And sometimes that's.
But here's the thing I'm trying to get to, though. If he's treating me shabbily, there's a chance I'm gonna say, why is he treating me like this? Well, now I just went from I'm serving him to I'm worried about me now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, as opposed to when I'm being treated shabbily, say, I wonder what's going on in his life.
Right.
That he would want, to smack me around his office like this. I mean, that would get me to another level of conversation where I'm not on the defensive. I'm just sitting here and going, I'm really here. I just want to do the best thing for you. Is there anything else that we should be talking about besides, this product or this solution? Is something else going on that I might be able to help you with? It just changed the whole conversation versus, I'll tell you that David, he's a jerk. He's the things he said to me, right?
Yeah.
As soon as I use the first part of that, me again, or I've lost it. I've lost it in that sales cycle.
Yeah.
Focus has been switched again. That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, no. And
is that true?
It is true. And it takes a certain level of just being secure in who you are as a human being. It really does. Because if you bring insecurity into a relationship, then it makes it too easy to shift back to, wait, he's treating me badly.
Yeah, right.
I'm getting abused in this relationship. If we're secure in who we are and the understanding of who we are, then that doesn't make a difference. I mean, it's so funny because I had a conversation with somebody recently about praying for somebody in public. And the person that I'm having the conversation with is like, yeah, that would be really difficult for me to do. And as we got into the conversation, it really was more around the fact of their insecurity about for them.
Well, that's what he said. It would be difficult for me to do.
Right. Right. So that, I mean, obviously that shows.
As opposed to me saying, I really don't do it because it makes others uncomfortable. That's
right.
a different way to express that.
It is. Yeah.
It's really, I think we should be paying attention to the language that we use. And if we're using I or me, we're not on it. So knowing who we are and being a Christian, knowing who you are in Christ and that you're loved by the Lord,
mm-hmm.
That's high confidence. But the other is that you are on his mission. And the mission is to serve others.
Right.
In any way that you can. And when we come off of that mission, no matter what we are, customer support, doing accounting, in our case, what we're talking about is selling. We are the tip of the spear for prospects.
Yeah.
We're the place where it all happens. What an opportunity a salesperson has if they are on mission to serve others as opposed to be on mission to hit quota by closing a sale.
Yeah.
But you got to trust that. How do you get to trusting that, like you said when you started this about standing in front of the room and the sales manager goes, 88.8 million. The most important thing that you can remember as you're in this room. And you said it's not. It's really about serving others. But I have to then trust that number is going to get blown away. How do I get to that trust factor? Because I almost feel like I'm ministering to people as opposed to selling to people.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. What are your thoughts there?
I'm trying to remember the title of the book. I think it was one of Dan Pink's books where he studied the different reciprocity styles that people bring to the business world. And it was a real... So reciprocity would be either you're a taker, a giver, or a matcher. So it's the
as a
mindset,
prospect or a salesman.
Yes, and it's the mindset.
Give me those three again.
It's a taker,
yeah,
a giver, or a matcher.
Okay.
So I do something for you, you do something for me. So they looked at these three reciprocity styles and they studied them as they show up in the business world. And so
you gave me the matching example. Matching is I do something for you, you do something for me.
Right.
Okay. The giver?
The giver is so I'll give you an example. A giver shows up in their workplace and they're looking for opportunities to help their teammates.
Okay.
They're looking for ways that they can contribute to the success of others in the organization. Their mindset isn't what can these people do for me? It's
so
what
the giver is I'm all about you and how I can help you, not expecting anything back.
Right.
I'm just giving.
Right.
What about the taker?
Taker, they're just trying to climb the corporate ladder, do whatever it takes to advance their own career, and their entire focus is on them. How do I succeed?
So the way we were in using our language, we go from taker being me, giver being you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And matcher being us.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that'd be a very simple way. Now, the interesting thing about the research that they did...
pronouns, we're learning about ourselves based on the pronouns that we use when we talk.
Right.
That's what I'm kind of pulled out of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead. So now go on. So we got takers, givers, matchers, which is me, you, and us.
Right. So in the research leading up to the book, the author believed that the takers would always be more successful in the business world because they would be focused on their career, on their advancement. But Charlie, here's what they found. Didn't matter what the profession was. It could be operations, it could be sales, it could be accounting, it could be finance. Didn't matter what as they studied the behavior and the success of people in the business world, they found that the givers in the long run were always more successful. Takers were successful like in the short run, maybe in the first 9 to 12 months in a role. But after that, the givers would far exceed being successful in their role, even to the point that they could give an assessment to sales team members inside of an organization to determine, are they a taker, a giver, or a matcher? And then they would correlate the ones that were givers to quota attainment. And they found, again, that the givers were more successful.
Okay.
Now, and in that book, they also studied compensation for salespeople.
Well, let me go back to this, the givers on that, just who's more successful is you talked about takers and talked about givers, but you didn't say about matchers.
Yeah,
Where were they in this, in this success pyramid, I mean, so the taker's good for short term, he excels and then drops off. The giver does not excel originally, but then starts to bypass the taker.
Right.
Who's the matcher? In other words, it's one of these win-win kind of deals, we would call it, right?
Yeah. 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 So they lived right in the middle of that gap between the
Okay.
taker and the giver. And there are times in a relationship where, again, the relationship is going to be mutually beneficial, but that's not necessarily the mindset of the giver. Again, the mindset of the giver is how can I improve the life of the person that I'm building a relationship with, or the people that I work with?
So if I have takers and then I have givers, okay,
Mm-hmm.
all right, then really in between I have matchers. Because when I'm a matcher, okay, meaning us, I float between taker and giver.
You could, yeah.
That's what it does. I mean, and I've been in deals where I want a good deal for the other person. And then at some point I might say, like, wait a minute, there is a fairness factor here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You really do need to think about where I'm coming out on this deal too,
Yeah.
because we have a long-term relationship going forward. That's somebody that might be hammering me for discounts. At some point, I have to say no, because look, I have to make a living and my company needs to make a profit. I mean, help me
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Help me out here.
Yeah. The other place that it shows up is in the way that salespeople are compensated. So Dan Pink wrote a book called Drive that was all about motivation, what motivates people, and they studied the three different compensation plans that sales leaders or companies typically use. You've got 100% commission, salary and commission, or 100% salary.
Mm-hmm.
And they studied across various industries, various products, which one of those compensation structures created the best success for the sales team. You want to take a guess as to which one created the best success?
My guess is 50-50 plans, salary plus, so you get paid 50 grand in salary, 50 grand in commission.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that would be my guess. That's where most plans end up, but I'm guessing that fair for the employee, they're not on the edge,
Mm-hmm.
and yet fair for the business because there's some variable cost involved. But where is it? I mean,
Yeah. So the majority of the sales organizations that I've worked with over the last 13 years would fall into that camp,
okay,
a base and commission. But here's what,
50-50 plan.
yeah,
Okay,
here's what Dan Pink found in actually doing the research.
okay.
100% salary created the highest performance.
Get out of here.
No, I'm
Get
absolutely.
out of That's so hard to believe.
So why would
Talk
that be?
about that a little bit. Talk about that a little bit, because that's so antithetical
Yeah.
to all sales plans. Sales plans not only have 50-50, but on the 50 that's commission. So then what you do is you make sure that when they start exceeding quota, you
Mm-hmm.
put more incentives in place so that they continue that momentum.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're saying that I don't even need any of that stuff. If I just pay a guy full salary and pay him well, he's going to continue to do as much selling as he possibly can. He won't just be satisfied with the salary that he's been given and kind of just stop. That's the concern in all this. You're afraid that you don't want a rep to hit his number in his
Mm-hmm.
head. Oh, he can make 150 grand, but he's happy with 100, and he shuts off at 100. Starts leaving at 4:00 in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me how this worked. I don't understand this research and how it came up with 100% salary actually won the day.
It did, and again,
Convince me.
it was across various industries. Well, Charlie, even the way that you're talking to me right now, you're talking about a salesperson that has a mindset of I'm in this for me. I've got
Good. Okay. I got you slapping me around. I'm good with that.
And so that's the key. If you pay a salesperson what they're worth, they show up in the conversations with prospects and customers. Guess what they're not thinking about? They're not thinking about their commission. They're not thinking about what's in it for them. They're taken care of. That's been taken off the table. They're already taken care of. So they can give 100% focus and 100% mindset on what's going on in your world, Charlie. How can I help you?
It's crazy, but that actually relaxed me and actually feels right. I don't know if I was running a sales organization, or if I was a CEO, which is the role that I more came out of. Okay, and I don't know that I'd have the nerve to take on the complete responsibility for that sales expense, meaning the salaries,
Mm-hmm.
in anticipation of hitting my number. Okay. In other words, I like the idea of sharing the cost, making some of it fixed cost and some of it variable cost.
Right.
But what you're telling me is, yeah, you are doing that, Charlie, but you're also setting yourself up for a pretty big miss. What percentage of, you deal with a lot of sales forces and study this a lot, what percentage of sales forces actually hit quota?
Are you talking about the sales team members as far as the split in the organization, or just the entire organization actually hitting their quota?
I'm talking about, you got a sales team, like let's use that lady, $88.8 million, right?
Right.
That's the number. Now I got a sales team of 40 people.
Mm-hmm.
Is that how many people are in the room?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I got 40 people, $88.8 million. Simple math, I divide $88.8 million by 40 people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That means they got to do 2.2 million each.
Right.
All right. What percentage of those 40 people are going to be to do 2.2 million or greater?
It's funny.
What's the expectation from that female sales manager?
Uh-huh.
What's her expectation on what's going to happen?
It's the 80-20 split. Actually, I think the research recently, it's more like 83-17, which means 17% of that room will exceed quota. The other 83% won't.
But then you would say, that's a startling number. And I know there's statistics on all of this, generally across the board, but 17% hit or exceed quota.
Mm-hmm.
83% never hit quota.
Right.
And then, of course, there's a breakdown there, right? I mean, there's some percentage that are like 50% or below. Do you know what that number is?
I don't. I've paid attention to kind of the high perspective. Again, either 80-20 or 83-17. And by the way, that hasn't changed much in the last 20 years.
I believe that 100%. I believe that 100%. But you're saying, if you stood up or sat in a room with this sales manager on her 88.8 million and her 40 reps, you'd
Mm-hmm.
say, I want you to throw out your sales plan. I want you to pay everybody the OTE in salary.
Right.
Target earnings in salary, starting today. And I'm telling you, you're going to hit that 88.8 million. Would you say that to her?
I would. I've taken that book, Drive, and opened it up to the page where the research shows that the compensation structure, you pay them 100% salary, creates higher performance. I've shown sales leaders that. Here it is. This is not my opinion. This is research that was done empirically. You can do a deeper dive into what actually was going on during the research. This is not my opinion.
And what's their reaction to that?
Nobody has changed their comp plan.
Nobody. Isn't that interesting? Okay. So then my question becomes is what's key to this? It's one thing to pay them out in salary. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's one part of it. The other part of this, in order for those statistics to actually play out, is you have to change the mindset of the salesperson, the heart and the mindset, to use your terminology when you were a waiter,
Mm-hmm.
waiting on those 16 women, okay, in the steakhouse. You have to change the heart and the mindset to get the return on the salary that you're paying.
Right.
Right? So
Yeah.
if I hire to a mindset, it's all about me, and you're paying me a high salary, then I'm like, isn't this great? The guy's paying me this high salary and I can work, a 30-hour week. And if I hit the number, great. If I don't hit the number, great. It doesn't matter. I'm getting a salary. Now I'm saying I again.
Right.
So how do you move me from I to them or they? You see, I'm serving to go from I to you, if you will. How do I do that?
So
How do I change, if this is your question to you, when you walk in, you got those 40 people in the room. This was a big question I had for you. Is what you're saying is like, oh God, makes so much sense. But obviously, because they're not willing to pay salary and eliminate all commissions, that says that the culture is still I-based or me-based. Okay, that's the assumption. How do you change that culture of one salesman? Talk about one sales guy. Give me an example of one sales guy that sort of took on this heart and mind change that you took on as a server. Tell me how they got there or how you got them there.
So a lot of it goes to the science of how human beings relate to each other.
Okay.
Just building a relationship. And I talk about three different hormones. So we experience cortisol, we experience dopamine, and we also experience oxytocin. Now, cortisol is a stress hormone. And if somebody is experiencing cortisol, if I'm having a conversation with you and you start to get defensive, that's because you're experiencing cortisol. It's a fight or flight hormone. And that happens when salespeople are focused on themselves. Again, we as human beings, we can sense when somebody is just trying to manipulate us. Hey, I got a great deal for you. It's only good until the end of the day. Hey, I've got a club trip coming up. You're going to help me win it. This is all about them. And as a human being in that relationship, whoever that person is talking to, they experience cortisol, so they get defensive. That's not a posture that you want a prospect to be in. Now, the other hormone is dopamine, and dopamine is a feel-good hormone. And so dopamine happens, the best example I can think of is most people have a to-do list that they create during the day. And when you check off one of the items that you've completed, it makes you feel good, right? Dopamine, that's a short-term feel-good hormone. I know this sounds ridiculous. I've even added an item that I did that wasn't on the list so I could check it off just because it would feel good, right? Here's the
You are a real sales guy. Okay, I get it. Okay, go ahead.
So the hormone that you want at play when you're trying to build a relationship with another human being is oxytocin. Oxytocin is the trust hormone. Oxytocin is at the highest state in a human being when actually a mother gives birth to a baby. And when they take the baby and put it on the mother's chest, oxytocin for both the baby and the mother to create that bond, that connection between mother and child.
What a great example. That's good.
So oxytocin also shows up in a relationship when the person that you're building a relationship with feels like you're in it for them. There's no ulterior motive. There's nothing going on in the relationship where you feel like you're being played. And one of the videos that I play in the workshops that I do, it's a blind man sitting in a park. And the blind man has a sign that says, "I'm blind, please help." And people are walking by and periodically they're putting money in the tin and on the mat. This woman walks up. She sees what's happening. She takes the sign and you just see her writing on it and she puts it back down. Almost immediately, everybody walking by is putting money on the mat. So she comes back a little bit later in the video. The blind man reaches out and touches her feet and realizes it's the woman that changed the sign. And he looks up at her and he goes, "What did you do to my sign?" And she said the same words, but better. And then the camera pans down to the sign. And the sign no longer says, "I'm blind, please help." It says, "It's a beautiful day and I can't see it." Now, how do you think the woman felt when she came back and saw all that money on the mat? She felt amazing.
Yeah.
She felt amazing. Now, here's what she didn't do, Charlie. She didn't lean over to the blind man and go, "Hey, I'm a marketing genius. I'm going to change your sign. I want 20% of the net profit." She didn't say that. And so as the blind man, there was nothing that the blind man could do to reward her. So there was no ulterior motive from her standpoint.
She was a giver.
Yeah, he was a giver, or she was a giver. So the same thing, that's the same mindset that I'm trying to communicate to the salesperson that you just referenced, that I'm going to change their heart. It's like, this is the way that the human condition works. If you want to build trust in another human being, they cannot feel like you have an ulterior motive in the relationship. They have to feel like, and the feel and emotions are really, really important. They have to feel like that you're in it for them. And that's why I get them to answer that question. how is the person that you want to build a relationship with, or how is the person that you want to sell to, how are they going to be better off as a result of doing business with you? For the woman, the blind man was better off because more people are giving. And so she didn't have any other motive or intent in it other than to impact another human being using the gift and talent that she had.
Well, those are great examples. I'm still a little stuck though.
Okay.
And it is so difficult for people to change. So difficult. You had a God intervention that made you change.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You came to know Christ as your Lord and Savior, which is a supernatural change that takes place in us.
Right.
And then he then shows up and says, hey, it's not about you. It's about them. And you heard it, you felt it, you couldn't let go of it. It was like stuck to you.
Mm-hmm.
You just had to deal with it. So that change took place, which is remarkable at such a young age. Okay. But let's say you got somebody that's been selling for 15 years. They're 37 years old and they've always been transactional sellers. They've been the cortisol or dopamine kind of sellers. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly the cortisol. Now's the deal. The used car salesman pitch, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't care. This is a really great car. This is a really great price. This isn't going to be here long. This car is going to move probably in the next 24 hours. So you want this car. You need to make a deal now. Okay. You walk off this lot, you're going to lose this car. Then you're going to be out there wasting a lot of time looking for something. And it's not going to be as good as what you're seeing right here, right now. Okay. Well, that puts stress. I could feel the cortisol really building up in me as I'm giving that pitch. Okay. But that's what that guy's been doing for 15 years. That salesman. Okay. How do you switch that guy to be this oxytocin or trust-based used car salesman, okay, who's got this attitude of, I'm in it for you, okay? Same situation. How do you move me from 15 years of holding people by the neck to close deals to, no, my heart's changed, my mind's changed, I'm really here for you? How do you change that? How do you get that person to change? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's a difficult question and a difficult proposition because you're right. And I had that conversation with the CEO of a company probably 3 years into my journey at MasterMessaging, and they looked at me and they're like, "You're really trying to change their heart."
Yeah, right. Great insight.
Yeah, and I said, "You know what? You're right. But if I can't change their heart, then at least I would like to change their behavior." And the way to change their behavior that I've been using in the 13 years that I've been running MasterMessaging is to look into the world of science and hold out to them. This is the way that the human being was designed. This is how we were created. This is how we operate in interpersonal relationships. And everything that I'm getting ready to show you, Mr. or Mrs. Salesperson, that's been selling from an I focus for the last 15 years, everything that you're getting ready to hear is not my opinion. It's rooted in science, from a scientific understanding of how human beings behave in a relationship. So what you're going to hear are examples of how this science plays out in a selling relationship. And then again, I'll take them to the understanding of how these hormones work. Or I'll point out the fact that Daniel Kahneman, who's a brilliant behavioral psychologist, he cracked the code in understanding that human beings make decisions based on meaning and emotion and justify their decisions with logic and reason. And so as I'm communicating these scientific principles, these scientific truths, I'm tying it to the way that they behave in a selling relationship. So if people make decisions based on meaning and emotion, what emotion and how are you making people feel in the way that you interact with them? Do they feel defensive?
Yeah, I get it. I see. So one of the things I'm seeing from our conversation here is we started out with, if yours is, in order to turn into this successful and to move to a new selling model, which is the selling model of you're there to serve others.
Right.
Versus I'm here to consummate a deal. Or worse yet, I'm here to get a deal for me.
Right.
Okay. So I go to we first talked about pronouns, which you'll know when you're describing what you do, where
Mm-hmm.
you are. If I'm saying I or me, it's all about me.
Right.
If I'm saying you, then I am one of those sellers. Okay. That's really about the other person, the prospect. And if I'm saying us, I'm a match guy. Okay. So we talked about you're a taker, a giver, or a matcher. So let's say so that's the first criteria. I can say, okay, I want to be a giver, which is what you promote.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I want to be a giver. So now I say, well, how can I tell if I'm succeeding at being a giver? Okay. And one of those ways is to say, what hormone is being created in this conversation
Right.
at the prospect level, right? Is it cortisol, the stress hormone? Is it dopamine, making them really feel good? Or best yet, is it oxytocin, right? Which is, we're both feeling this trust, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's, these are all, so you have to make a choice to leave where you are. I need to first realize that, oh my God, I am a taker, but I want to be a giver. I need to change my pronouns. I need to change my mission and how I look at things. And then my test is what hormones sort of being created in this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does, and I have to speak into the pronoun topic that you keep bringing up, because this is fascinating. Back in the 80s, direct mail was king. Again, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have email.
Oh, I made my money. That's where we got our leads.
Yeah, yeah. So it was
Those 2
all
to 3% returns.
right, right. So somewhere in the mid 80s, one of the individuals that was responsible for that industry and was kind of leading that industry, they had an amazing discovery. And that is by changing one word in a direct mail piece, they would double the response rate just by changing one word. You want to know what the word was?
Yeah.
You, using the concept of you phrasing. And so here's the contrast. Before they understood the importance of you would get a mailer in your mailbox, Charlie, that would say, hey, we just opened up a new fitness facility down the road. We've got a swimming pool. We've got racquetball courts. We've got free weights. We've got Nautilus. We've got all this amazing equipment. It's I, and we. Come and check us out. All right. So
Well, it's
that would
also another way to say it. It's the focused on the solution,
right.
right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So by changing that direct mail piece to, hey, what if you could have the body of your dreams in the next 12 months? What if you could experience that with other community members in a fun and relaxing environment? And finally, what if you could do this in a way that doesn't add anything more to the workload of your day? Well, you can at our new fitness facility. We've got a swimming pool. We've got this. We've got that. By using you phrasing, what if you could, or imagine if you could, it doubled the response rate of the direct mail piece. The same thing happens in a selling conversation. We're so hardwired to look at the world from our point of view. We will start conversations like, hey, Charlie, what I'm going to show you today is how to change the mindset of a salesperson. If I use you phrasing the right way, it's, hey, Charlie, what you're going to hear today is how salespeople, salespeople's hearts and minds can be changed to be more servant focused. So you phrasing changes the focus of the conversation from me to you. And it's the most difficult technique that I teach salespeople, to use you phrasing, because we're hardwired to say I or we.
So let's talk about that real case. I love the example you gave with the 40 salespeople in the room.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of those sellers, I don't, I would say, particularly if you're getting down to a very short sales cycle, the majority of those sellers are going to be transactional me sellers,
Mm-hmm.
Because they were clearly led by a me manager.
Right.
By the statement, that's the biggest number. Okay. That's your number. That's what you should be thinking about, because that's what she was thinking about all the time. So you need to help me get to my number so we as a company can succeed, right? I mean, that was me, we, all first person, all right? What do you do with those 40 people? How do you even get started with that? Like, how do you implement then this methodology, this sort of step by step? How do you bring them along? I wouldn't even know where, I guess I wouldn't know where to start. If we were one-on-one, it'd be different, but I got 40 people in the room. So
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit.
Well, you just said something that obviously is very important, and that's the leadership. So it starts with the leader. And I've had conversations with leaders that sound something like this. Hey, Charlie, you lead a sales team. You've got a quota that you're responsible for. If all you do is interact with your sales team members around quota and quota attainment, then what do you think they're thinking about when they sit down to have a conversation with a prospect? I need this deal. I need this deal to get me closer to my quota attainment, because that's what my boss or my manager is speaking to me all the time. So I said, what would happen if you added a field inside of your Salesforce or whatever CRM that you're using? And for every prospect that your sales team is responsible for building a relationship with, you built that question into Salesforce. How is this prospect going to be better off as a result of working with us? You're starting to change the mindset of your sales team, because you're inspecting what you expect from them. So it has to happen from the top down. Because if I'm working with the 40 salespeople and I'm talking about this other focus, this looking at the sales profession as a way to serve other human beings, and the leader is like, quota, 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 where are we on quota? Where's this deal? How's this deal going to get done? Then it's going to be very difficult. There's no way that I'm really going to be able to change the culture or the minds of the salespeople. So it starts with the leader to get them to understand that this has to be an other focus sales organization.
So you're moving from sales is selling to sales is serving?
Yes.
Is that a good way to say it?
It's a perfect way to say it.
That's what you do.
Yeah.
I take sales organizations from sales is selling to sales is serving.
Yes.
And through that transition, achieve incredible results.
Yeah. Yeah. And you talked about the process that I walked through with a sales organization. One of the first steps is that before you ever sit down to have a conversation with somebody, you have to understand their world. You have to put yourself in their seat. You have to understand their point of view. So one of the things that we do with the sales organizations that we serve is we have the salespeople go through an exercise. What are the different industries that you want to do business with? And then who are the personas inside of those industries? Is it an operation executive? Is it a sales executive? Who are the people that you have to build a relationship with? Okay, now that you understand who they are, what are they up against? What are they trying to accomplish? What are the challenges that they're facing in their world that are keeping them from success? What's the impact of those challenges on their? And you have to have a deep understanding of that in order to be empathetic, in order to look at your product through the eyes of the person that you want to build a relationship with, so that you can understand how their life would be better. You can't understand how their life would be better if you don't know what their life looks like today. And with the advent of the internet, there's not a salesperson that should ever show up in the first 2 minutes of a conversation and go, "Hey, Charlie, what keeps you up awake at night? What are the problems or challenges that you're facing?" Because if you ask that question in the first couple of minutes of your initial conversation, you've just telegraphed to the person, "I don't know anything about you. I don't know anything about your role." You should know everything about that person. As a matter of fact, you should be bringing insights that that person doesn't even know about the challenges and problems that they're facing, because you deal with people like them every day. And so it starts with the journey of changing the behavior or the mindset of a salesperson. It starts with them just absolutely knowing that they've got to be up to speed on what's going on in the world of the people that they want to serve.
So know all you can about the prospect before you make a call. And then individually, you also you start with empathy,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Putting in, which is putting yourself in their shoes, if you will, and understanding them personally.
Right.
not just their environment, and understand what they're trying to achieve or their goals.
Right.
Right. But it's all about them. See, for some reason, that question of yours is, how is the prospect going to be better off by working with me? Okay, let's say, all right, or with us as a company. For some reason, that question doesn't resonate well with me, given what we just, what we really are trying to achieve.
Okay.
I don't know why. It almost feels like it's sort of middle ground between me and them.
Well, so maybe this example will help. So I was at a networking meeting at Tech Village about 4 or 5 years ago. And, it's a pretty common question to go, hey, my name is David. I'm with MasterMessaging. What do you do? And so this individual that I'm having the conversation with goes, I'm a business development rep for a data center. I was like, okay. So I have an understanding of what a business development rep does, a BDR rep does. I said, so how do you like it? His response was, yeah, it's a lot of cold calls. I've got to make, anywhere from 60 to 80 dials a day. I'm interrupting people's world. I get yelled at a lot. And I'm like, yeah, it's a tough job. I said, but let me ask you this question. For the people that you're calling, how would they be better off as a result of doing business with you? And as you answer that question, I want you to not say anything about the product or service that you represent. You can't say anything about the data warehouse. And he looked at me kind of funny and he goes, well, that's an unusual question. I said, I know, but do your best. How are they better off? So he thought about it for a few seconds and he goes, peace of mind. And I said, why peace of mind? And he says, because we have 99.99999% redundancy in our data warehouse, so they never have to worry about their data. They can have peace of mind. I said, great. I said, what else? And he goes, time freedom. I said, well, why time freedom? And he goes, because if they give us that portion of their IT department and they give that responsibility to us, then the people that work there can focus on other more important things. So they're going to have time freedom. I said, okay, so let me get this straight. You're having a hard time picking up the phone and calling somebody to introduce time freedom and peace of mind when there's very little of that in the world that we live in. Is that what you're struggling with? And Charlie, he had an epiphany.
That's
he
the
was like,
aha moment.
Yeah, he was like, I never thought about it that way. I said, that's the right way to think about it. It's how you're going to be bringing something to them or introducing something to them that is going to be of immense benefit. So you're not interrupting their world to be in a nuisance. You're interrupting their world to give them an opportunity to experience time freedom and peace of mind.
Well, so let's go down this road just a bit.
Okay.
Like when we were talking about serving, have this view of serving your prospects. In other words, I sell through serving versus sell by selling, if you will. I did do an interview with a guy named Russ West. It's part of my library here, who was an extraordinarily successful enterprise sales rep. Okay. And he could tell story after story of what you told when you were with AT&T. And that executive where he just sort of unloaded on you all that's going on in his life.
Right.
Okay. He has story after story of that. He never saw himself he almost saw himself, and he was a Christian guy. He's a Christian guy too, but he almost described it. He says, I really don't sell. I'm more like a minister, okay, on property, And he just really connected with these guys. They'd ask him for advice in their lives and their marriages and all. It was amazing how it all brought together. He would always wait until the last month of the year to hit this immense quota that he had.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it always worked. It's crazy stuff. All right. Now, that's one guy, and that's that sales situation, enterprise stuff. Okay. Where you got relationship building that's really taking place and accounts that you're well embedded.
Right.
Now, the other situation is the whole end of the stream is BDR.
Right.
Right. So, okay, I get that guy, and I get selling. Selling is serving. Okay. Take me to the BDR. I mean, this guy, here he is. He is told, you need to pound the phones and get us some leads, okay, that we can pass on to someone who's going to do a demo. Okay. I mean, this is You're in the SMB marketplace and you're just going 100 calls a day, 200 calls a day, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So when I know I'm skipping a lot of steps in what the job is, but I'm trying to get to a simple question. The question is when I get somebody on the phone, when I finally get somebody on the phone, because I wrote a really cool email about you and your time and whatever, or I left a really good message about you and your time or whatever, how do I deal with that person? I mean, what do I say? Because all I'm trying to do is get them to a demo.
Yeah. So the key is I
I'm a
wouldn't.
BDR. Help me, man. I've been
Yeah.
pounding here.
Yeah. So I wouldn't have told that BDR, hey, when the person answers the phone, hi, I'm, David Kurkjian with Data Warehouse, wanted to talk to you about how you could experience more time freedom and peace of mind in your life. So I wouldn't necessarily coach them to do that. But for the person that has just answered the phone, if they had more time freedom, what could they do with it? They could actually repurpose it to focus on other more mission critical aspects of their job. So I would coach that BDR to say something like, hey, Charlie, I know I interrupted your day. Can I have a few seconds to tell you why I've called? And Charlie, you go, sure. Well, the reason for my call is to schedule an appointment where we can have a conversation around how you can spend more time on mission critical aspects of your job to serve your internal clients inside your organization. When would be a good time for us to do that? And so what you're doing is you're holding out the outcome that you know that you can create for them. You're holding out the benefit in that very succinct statement. And by the way, for that BDR, if the CIO or whoever it is that they're talking to hears that, wait, you're going to give me more time freedom to focus on mission critical aspects so I can actually do my job better. How are you going to do that?
Yeah, it does. It does.
You want them to ask that question. Well, that's the reason for my call. I want to schedule a time where we can have a conversation around how that can happen in your world. When would be a good time for that to happen? So the benefit statement that you're going to hold out, or the value statement that you're going to hold out, is going to create intrigue in the mind of the prospect, because you didn't go, hi, I'm David Kurkjian with Data Warehouse. I want to set up a time to tell you about all the amazing things that we do at our data warehouse. So even in that value statement, you can use you phrasing. So what if you could experience more time freedom to focus on mission critical aspects to better serve your constituency?
Well, when you bring it down, I mean, that was an aha moment for me. That was really good. All right. That was excellent, that example. And I think what you get to is, and I talk to CEOs and we talk about mission statements.
Mm-hmm.
A mission statement is much like that. It's very succinct, but if you can get somebody to say, that's interesting, how do you do that? You got something, okay? And now here we are saying the same thing.
Yes.
It's sort of like mission statement that would be gigantic. We make the world better with every product that we place. Okay. And people are like, well, how do you do that? Right. I mean, now we have a conversation going,
Right.
Because I want the world to be better. I want a better world for me, whatever. So you can say these mission statements that way. But this is what you're saying is, I like that, is if you could, a good test on whether you are selling by serving is if people get to how questions. Prospects ask how.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Because I'm not interested in, if you say, we have 99.999% uptime.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say, how do you do that? As a prospect, I'm not going to ask that. You made a statement and I either believe it or I don't believe it. Okay. And if I don't believe it, you lost me. If I do believe it, it didn't matter.
Right.
So I like this where it's, you're going to get me free time and you're going to give me peace of mind and I can work on other things. How are you going to do that?
Right.
Like, cool, let's talk about it. I like that. That's really good. That is really, really good. I like the direct mail thing, changing from me, what I have, my solution, to you and what it would mean to you.
These are all, again, they're all examples, all based on science as to why a sales professional should change their mindset from this is all about me to making it all about them. Now, here's the other truth that shows up in our world all the time. I tell salespeople, your prospects and customers don't care what your product or service does. They don't. They care about what it means to them and the value for them. And by the way, they're not really going to listen to what it is that your product or service does until they understand the value and what it means to them. And there's a second part to what you heard me say earlier around focusing on understanding the world of the person you're going to be communicating with. Understanding what are their goals? What are they trying to accomplish? What does success look like in their world? And then what are the challenges and the impact of those challenges on them and their organization if they can't solve those? So the communication of meaning and value, there's, again, a scientific principle at play. Value shows up in a contrasting worldview. Again, this is more of the research that Daniel Kahneman did. And the contrasting worldview is, this is what your world looks like today without my product, contrasted with, this is what your world could look like with my product. Now, there's a challenge with the second piece over here. So the best example, or a great example of this is I take part in a fundraising bike ride every year to raise money for kids with autism. And it's called Bike to the Beach. So I go with my brother-in-law and sister-in-law. They drop us off somewhere in rural Delaware. And then it's 55 miles to go to the beach. And 3 years ago, the organizers of the race, they started the race in a part of rural Delaware where they had stripped a road of its top coat. That is not a recipe for a fun bike ride.
No, not at all.
No,
That's
not
awful.
those real skinny tires. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're riding thinking, well, all of our tires are going to explode. This is horrible. Well, after 5 miles of this horrible experience, we hit the newly paved section of road. And everybody within earshot of where I was riding immediately exclaimed, "Oh my gosh, this is the smoothest road I've ever been on." Charlie, they wouldn't have said that if we had started the race on the smooth road, because there would be no contrast. So value is perceived in a contrasting worldview. And the sales organizations that I work with, I introduce a very simple story arc that they can use to create a high value conversation. And it starts with in working with professionals like you, Charlie, I know that, or I'm hearing that they're challenged with this, this, and this. And the impact of that challenge is this. So, Charlie, that's what I'm hearing and seeing from your peers. I'm curious, what does that look like in your world? And then give the person.
Great question. I like
Yeah.
the contrasting. That value is perceived in a contrasting worldview. I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
So let me get to your business. Okay. You call it MasterMessaging.
Mm-hmm.
Where did that come from? And why is that appropriate for capturing all that we're talking about here?
Yeah. Actually, I have to give 100% credit to my wife for coming up with that name.
Okay.
We were just kicking around some ideas, and I knew when I made the decision to start MasterMessaging, realized that there had to be something unique that I was going to bring to the sales profession. And so the focus really was on the conversation, focusing on because Charlie, there's 100 different methodologies out there, from Sandler selling to Miller Hyman to these are all methodologies of do this, then do this, then do this, and then do this. And I realized that in my experience, 35 years of selling, my success came from the conversation. Mm-hmm. So you're at a specific stage of the sales process. Great. What are you going to say? And how is that going to build trust, credibility, and convey value? So my wife knew that based on all the behavioral psychology books that I was reading, that it was really around messaging and conversation. And so she was like, why not MasterMessaging? And by the way, David, there's a double entendre there, because the master messenger, Jesus Christ, was the best communicator that's ever walked the planet.
Right.
There's never been anyone better that could connect with another human being in a way that Jesus did.
And and Jesus also said, and I know the hearts of men.
Right. Right.
He knows us really well, going back to your psychology books and all. Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's good.
Yeah. So my wife was like, why not MasterMessaging? It's the reference to the master, but it's also you're helping sales professionals master the message or the conversation that they're having with prospects and customers.
Absolutely. That's great. Okay. So then my question to you is, as a sales professional who runs a company called MasterMessaging, how do you tell me a good prospect from a bad prospect? how do you qualify for a service that's such as what you offer? To say, I can, do you work with everybody, or do you say, no, I'll never get anywhere here? You know what I'm saying? So I got to pass on this one. How do you qualify people for this service and this service of master messaging?
Yeah. So the principles that we teach, because they're based on behavioral psychology, transcend all industries. So we could help any entrepreneur or any sales professional, but you and I both know that that doesn't necessarily work. And so I've worked with a lot of
everybody's a prospect. No one's a prospect.
right.
Right.
Yeah. So it typically comes down to one of two camps: a very complicated product. That's a great fit. If you've got something that's really complicated, or the problems that you're solving are complicated, that's a good fit. And here's why: because you have to have the ability to take complex things and communicate them simply to another human being. And that lives at the heart of what we teach sales professionals, is how to simplify the conversations that you're having, so that no matter who the persona is that you're trying to build a relationship with this complicated thing, you've got a simple way of doing that. So an example of that, I've worked with like 4 different cybersecurity software companies. Again, they solve very complex problems inside IT organizations from a security standpoint. And the mistake that they often make as sellers is they're talking all this complicated jargon, and you can see the prospect, their eyes start to glaze over, and they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So that's a really good prospect, because they benefit more from what I teach the salespeople because of the complexity of the product. The other area would be a commoditized product.
The other end of the spectrum. Yeah.
Yeah. So right now I'm doing work with 2 very large franchisors in the US. One provides paint services and the other provides flooring. Well, guess what? You can go to Home Depot and you can get somebody to install flooring for you, right? So there's a lot of competition. It's a commoditized product. And so the value of what we bring to sales organizations in a commoditized product is, how do you differentiate yourself in the conversations that you're having to give yourself the best opportunity to serve that person with the product or service that you represent? So it's either complex or commoditized.
That. And if we look at, for example, a commoditized product in the technology sector, it would be temporary help.
Mm-hmm.
Contract programming, if you will.
Right.
We can bring a programmer in. What kind of programmer do you need? And what we have the best people and at the best price, and we can get them to you now. I mean, there is nothing greater commodity than that.
Right.
And have you dealt with those professional services type organizations?
I have. And it actually puts more emphasis on helping them understand the world of the people that they want to build a relationship with and sell to. It puts more of an emphasis on it, because one of the things that they realize is that I may not be able to hold out a widget that does something unique or different, but guess what I can do? I can interact with another human being in a way that is unique and different, and stand out because of that interaction, not so much because of the product or service that I represent.
All right, now I want to wind this up just a little bit here. We've covered a lot, and do you feel like we've kind of covered the methodology and the principles well here?
Yeah. But there's another half to the conversation we were having a minute ago. So challenges, impact, and then a good open-ended question: what does that look like in your world? But that then leaves the opportunity to create the other half of the equation for contrast. And that is the use of what we refer to as a value position statement. And it starts off with, what if you could, or imagine if you could. And so you've just had a conversation with somebody around, here are the challenges that I hear that your profession's having. Here's the impact of those challenges. Let me ask you some questions. What does that look like in your world? What have you tried to solve the problem? What's the impact if you can't solve the problem? And so what you're doing there is you're helping them understand their existing condition. This is the world that you live in today without my product. Then you're going to introduce a value position statement. And you heard an example of that just a few minutes ago. What if you could better serve your internal clients with some increased time freedom? Now, the challenge with a value position statement is you can't make any reference to your product or service, because if you do, you're talking about you. And the contrast has to show up talking about them. So this sales conversation roadmap, again, is a very simple story arc. And it actually is the focus of the book that I wrote, 6X Convert More Prospects to Customers. Because by
What did you call that? What did you call that thing? How did you capture this? You called it the what?
Sales Conversation Roadmap.
Sales Conversation Roadmap. Okay, so and that starts with a heart. I'm moved from selling to selling by serving.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's the first part.
Right.
Then I get into the sales conversation roadmap, which
Right.
is understanding what their challenges are. Okay, so again, this empathy piece and the understanding piece, then what impact happens, good or bad, based on these challenges, right? So
Right.
what makes these challenges challenging, and what happens if we don't face them properly or solve the problem. And then you get down to the value position statement.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So it's challenges impact value position. Is that what it is?
yeah. And the value position, all it is a description of what they can do differently with your product without saying anything about the product.
Okay. And that's called the sales conversation roadmap. And it's only these three things.
Well, the last part of it is after you do that, after you say, hey, what if you could have this world instead?
The imagine one. Yeah.
Then you go into you can, and here's how.
Okay.
And that's when you get to talk about your product. Because at that point, the person that you're communicating with understands the value and meaning for them. And now they want an understanding of, well, how do you do that?
Great. That is great. That is really great.
That's the epiphany that the entrepreneurs at Atlanta Tech Village have. When I walk them through the sales conversation roadmap, they look at that and they go, yeah, I was doing it all wrong. I was just showing up and maybe a little chit chat up front. And then it was right into here's what I've created and here's what it does. And I'm like, they don't care until they understand the value and meaning for them.
It's really good, David. This has been really, really good. One of the things that's pretty clear too is that we're talking about selling here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Or the sales process, the selling process, and selling by serving. This can extend to a lot of parts a lot of things in our life, right? A lot of roles in our life.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Husband, father, son, daughter, grandmother, grandfather. How do you carry this in to just everyday life?
It really does go back to a change of heart. It does. But there is a way to do it. It's as you're having a conversation with somebody, just being mindful of how am I making them feel? Because at the end of the day, as human beings, we don't remember what was said so much. We remember how other people made us feel. And whether I'm interacting with my wife or my adult children or my grandchildren, I'm just mindful of how are they experiencing this interaction? How is this making them feel? And it's one of the reasons why, throughout my adult life, I've loved working with 4 to 6-year-old kids in Sunday school because I have the ability to look at the world through their eyes and their perspective and share things with them where they're like, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I get it. Because and you know what, Charlie, some of this just happens to be from being in the sales profession for 40 years. You have so many of these conversations, you just get to a point where you're very much in tune with where is this other person coming. A lot of it is just from repetition. But I would encourage anybody that's listening to our conversation today to just be more intentional in asking the question, how is what's happening right here making the other person feel? What is their perspective in this conversation that we're having? What are they going to get out of it? Am I focused too much on me, or am I being more intentional about focusing on the other person?
So am I, and the check on that is, how am I making the other person feel? Really gets down to, am I creating stress in the other person?
Mm-hmm.
Am I making them feel good, or am I creating sort of a dynamic of stress, of trust here?
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is where we all want to be.
Yeah.
That's just beautiful. You are the master messenger. This is I really appreciate you taking all this time and sharing this message with me and the audience. I mean, I find this to be incredibly helpful. Those simple thoughts of the pronouns. You just want to test yourself
Yeah.
in what kind of seller you are. when somebody talks to you, if you start using words I and me as opposed to you and them, you know pretty quickly where you are.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
You've convinced me of something, two things, that we really want to be givers, which is antithetic to what, we would think would work. You would think that it really needs to be I need to be a matcher. In other words, it's a good deal for both of us kind of a thing. But by being a giver, you're creating trust, and you're in some cases trusting God as well as trusting the prospect, but that it's all going to work out for you. So that's can I change my mindset to become a giver so that I am in fact a seller who sells by serving? And then the next one was, I just can't get over, you said, that if you pay reps a salary of their on-target earnings, that they're actually going to hit more quotas than if you put them on a 50-50 commission plan.
Yeah.
Salary to commit. That was like, I just have to see that. But you're saying Michael Pink. Is it Michael? Not Michael Pink. What's his? Daniel Pink. Daniel Pink.
The book Drive. And I just thought of the other book. It's called Give and Take by Chip and Dan Heath. Give and Take by Chip and Dan Heath. They're the ones that studied the reciprocity styles.
So Give and Take. And the other one was Drive.
Drive.
Yeah, by Dan Pink. Yeah. And these are good places to start, to say, to do this self-evaluation as a salesperson or as an entrepreneur. Where am I? Am I a taker, giver, or matcher? Okay. What kind of in conversations am I creating stress? We all feeling good, or is there a trust that's being built here that we can build on for future relationships? All excellent stuff. Excellent. So thanks. I love that God gave you this passion for this as a 20-year-old waiter.
Right.
And how you carried it through 40 years of selling, and then now you're saying, I just need to pass this on. It's been such a good life.
Yeah.
Sounds like you got a wonderful wife too. Loves you dearly and understands what you do and appreciates you.
She does. She does. And 38 years of marriage, and have 4 adult kids and 7 grandkids. So
wow, what a blessing.
Extremely blessed. Yeah.
So it works. It works. I love it. Well, thank you. I appreciate it, David. And thank you for listening to us. I know you're getting a ton out of this. And I know several people that I'm going to pass this on to that I mentor who are looking to break into new sales, break into new territories and new industries, and people who really just want to be even more successful. If you have that list, pass it on to them if you found this valuable. Thank you, and thanks for listening.